Picture a lavish cliffside villa in Italy, champagne flowing freely, and a beaming family posing for the perfect portrait. Now, look closer at the empty space on the left. Betrayal runs deep when blood ties snap over a missing flight itinerary, turning a dream wedding into a catastrophic reckoning. In every family, there is a hierarchy. Some families try to hide it with equal affection and fair treatment, but mine wore their favoritism like a badge of honor. Vanessa was the undeniable, indisputable golden child. She was the one with the perfect teeth, the effortless charm, and the uncanny ability to make our parents, Margaret and Daniel, open their wallets without a second thought. I, on the other hand, was the reliable one. The background character, the designated problem solver, who was expected to applaud Vanessa's every breathing moment while asking for absolutely nothing in return. So, when Vanessa announced her engagement to Leo Moretti, the heir to a wealthy Milanese textile family, the entire dynamic of our household shifted from mildly toxic to utterly unbearable. The wedding was set to take place in Ravello, a stunning town perched high above the Amalfi Coast. It was going to be the social event of the decade, at least in my mother's mind. Margaret was determined to impress the Moretti family, which meant everything had to be flawless, bespoke, and astronomically expensive. There was just one tiny problem. My parents couldn't actually afford the aristocratic facade they were trying to project. That's where I came in. I work as a graphic designer and project manager, skills my family gleefully exploited. For 8 agonizing months, I was the unpaid, unappreciated backbone of this destination wedding. I designed the intricate, gold foil pressed invitations. I spent countless nights awake at 3:00 a.m., adjusting for the time difference, to negotiate with Italian florists, caterers, and the venue coordinator because I was the only one who bothered to learn basic conversational Italian. I tracked the RSVPs, organized the seating chart, and even hand-lettered the place cards. Whenever I brought up my own travel arrangements, Margaret would wave me off with a manicured hand. "Don't worry about it, sweetie," she'd say, her eyes glued to a bridal magazine. "Your father is handling the group booking. We're doing it all through the travel agent to get a bulk discount. You just focus on getting those menu translations perfect." I trusted them. That was my first and frankly most pathetic mistake. Exactly 10 days before we were scheduled to fly out of JFK, I was sitting at the kitchen island of my parents' house, finalizing the digital itinerary for the bridal party. I needed my flight confirmation number to check my baggage allowance because I was tasked with hauling an extra suitcase filled with custom linen napkins and party favors. "Mom," I called out as Margaret breezed into the kitchen, "I need the PNR for my flight. Are we flying Delta or Alitalia?" Margaret froze. The kind of freeze a deer does right before it gets obliterated by an 18-wheeler. She wouldn't look at me. Instead, she suddenly became very interested in rearranging the fruit bowl. "Oh, the flights. Right." Daniel walked in at that exact moment, carrying his golf clubs. "What about the flights?" "I need my ticket confirmation," I said, a slow, sickening feeling creeping into my stomach. My father sighed, setting his clubs down with a heavy thud. He looked at my mother, then at me, bearing the expression of a man inconvenienced by a minor accounting error. "We didn't book you a ticket." The kitchen went dead silent. The hum of the refrigerator suddenly sounded deafening. "I'm sorry, what?" I asked, a nervous laugh escaping my throat. "What do you mean you didn't book me a ticket? We leave in 10 days. "We had to make some budget reallocations," my father said stiffly, crossing his arms. The Morettis insisted on a specific vintage Alfa Romeo for the getaway car, and Vanessa absolutely needed the upgraded bridal suite with the terrace for the getting ready photos. The costs were spiraling out of control. "So you cut my flight?" My voice rose an octave, trembling with a mixture of shock and white-hot rage. "To pay for a rental car? I'm the maid of honor. I've practically planned this entire wedding for free." Margaret finally looked up, her expression hardening into defensive annoyance. "Don't be dramatic. It's not a big deal. The flights were getting absurdly expensive, and frankly, we need someone to stay behind and look after the house and the dogs. Plus, you're not even in the main bridal party photos because you refused to buy that specific $1,000 dress Vanessa picked out." Before I could even process the absolute audacity of that statement, Vanessa walked in. She was wearing a silk robe, sipping a green smoothie, radiating unbothered bridal glow. "What's all the yelling?" she asked. "They didn't buy my plane ticket to Italy," I snapped, turning to her, expecting at least a shred of sisterly solidarity. "They gave my ticket money to your car rental." Vanessa shrugged, taking a slow sip of her smoothie. "Honestly, it's probably for the best. You've been so stressed and snappy lately, you'd probably just bring the vibe down. And let's be real, you wouldn't really fit in with Leo's crowd anyway. They're very cosmopolitan. Just stay here. Enjoy the quiet time. It's basically a staycation." I stared at the three of them, my family, the people whose blood ran in my veins. They stood there, a united front of selfishness, completely unbothered by the fact that they were treating me like discarded trash just to preserve their pathetic illusion of wealth for some rich in-laws. They hadn't forgotten. They had made a calculated, deliberate choice. They had used me for free labor until the very last possible second. And when my usefulness ran out, they threw me away to upgrade a hotel room. "Okay," I whispered, my voice chillingly calm. The tears that had been pricking my eyes vanished, replaced by something much colder. "Okay. Have a great wedding." I grabbed my laptop, walked out of their house, and didn't look back. For 2 days, I ignored my phone. Margaret texted me a few times, mostly sending me passive-aggressive lists of dog-sitting instructions and asking if I could just quickly email the caterer about a vegan substitute for one of the guests. I blocked her number. I blocked Daniel. I blocked Vanessa. I sat in my apartment, staring at the ceiling, feeling the hollow ache of rejection. But slowly, the grief metamorphosed into pure, unadulterated spite. They thought they could just erase me. They thought they could use my sweat and tears to build their perfect Italian fantasy and then lock me out of the castle? Absolutely not. I checked my savings account. I had a decent amount saved up, ironically, money I had set aside for spending in Italy. Booking a flight 10 days out was notoriously expensive, but I wasn't looking for luxury. I didn't need a direct flight. I didn't need first class. I just needed to get to the Amalfi Coast. After hours of scouring the darkest corners of travel booking sites, I found a chaotic, grueling itinerary. A 16-hour journey involving a budget airline to Istanbul, a grueling 5-hour layover, and a connecting flight to Naples. It cost a fraction of what a direct flight would have. Next was accommodation. The family and the wealthy guests were all staying at a 5-star cliffside resort in Ravello, where rooms started at €1,000 a night. I, however, booked a bed in Mama Rosa's, a highly rated but deeply chaotic youth hostel right in the gritty, vibrating heart of Naples. From there, I mapped out the regional train and the perilous coastal bus route that would drop me right at the gates of Ravello. My plan was simple, reckless, and entirely driven by the petty desire for vengeance. I was going to crash my own sister's wedding. The journey was a blur of cramped legroom, stale pretzels, and caffeine-induced tremors. When I finally landed in Naples, the humid Italian air slapped me in the face. I dragged my single carry-on bag through the chaotic streets, dodging mopeds and shouting vendors until I found Mama Rosa's. It was a brightly painted, slightly dilapidated building, smelling intensely of garlic, cheap wine, and damp laundry. My dorm had 6 bunk beds, and my roommates were a group of raucous Australian backpackers who immediately offered me a shot of limoncello. I took the shot. I needed it. The first official event of the wedding weekend was the welcome dinner, hosted by Leo's parents, the formidable Isabella and Franco Moretti. It was taking place that very evening at a stunning terraced restaurant overlooking the Mediterranean. I showered in the tiny communal bathroom, washing the grime of 3 different time zones off my body. I didn't have the expensive designer gown my mother had tried to force on me. Instead, I pulled out a vintage emerald green silk slip dress I had thrifted months ago, paired with strappy gold sandals. I applied my makeup with military precision. I looked rested. I looked dangerous. The commute from Naples to Ravello took 2 hours. The Circumvesuviana train rattled along the coast, and the subsequent bus ride along the cliff-edge roads was terrifying, but I barely registered it. My heart was pounding a relentless, steady rhythm against my ribs. When I finally walked up the cobblestone path to the restaurant, the sun was just beginning to set, casting the Mediterranean in shades of bruised purple and burnished gold. I could hear the clinking of crystal glasses, and the low murmur of wealthy, polite conversation. I paused at the entrance, taking a deep breath, and stepped onto the terrace. It was a beautiful scene. Fairy lights were strung overhead. Waiters in crisp white shirts floated through the crowd with trays of Aperol spritz. And there, near the center of the terrace, was my family. Vanessa looked radiant in a white linen designer jumpsuit. Margaret and Daniel were holding court with a group of older Italians, laughing entirely too loud. I grabbed a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and walked straight into the lion's den. Margaret saw me first. I will never, for the rest of my life, forget the look on my mother's face. The polite, aristocratic smile she had plastered on for the Morettis literally slipped off her face, leaving her mouth hanging open in slack-jawed horror. Her eyes bulged, darting wildly around the terrace to see if anyone else had noticed the ghost that just walked in. Daniel followed her gaze, and his face instantly drained of all color. He looked like he was about to have a coronary incident. I gave them a bright, radiant smile, raised my champagne glass in a mock toast, and sauntered right past them. I made a beeline for the bride and groom. Vanessa was busy giggling at something Leo said when I tapped her lightly on the shoulder. Surprise, I purred. Vanessa spun around, her eyes wide with terror. "Clara! What? How? What are you doing here?" she hissed, her voice a desperate, strangled whisper. "I wouldn't miss my big sister's wedding for the world," I said sweetly, loud enough for Leo to hear. Leo turned, his face lighting up with genuine warmth. "Clara, you made it. We were so worried." "Worried?" I filed that piece of information away. Before Vanessa could intercept, Leo's mother, Isabella Moretti, a formidable matriarch, dripping in diamonds and intimidating elegance, glided over. "Clara Cara!" Isabella exclaimed, grasping my hands warmly. "We were devastated when your mother told us the dreadful news. To contract such a severe case of mononucleosis so close to the flight. We thought you were bedridden in New York. It is a miracle you recovered so quickly." The puzzle pieces snapped together in my mind with a deafening click. They didn't just tell the Morettis I couldn't afford it. They didn't tell them I was dog-sitting. My family had invented a highly contagious, severe illness to cover their tracks, painting themselves as the tragic, worried family leaving their sick daughter behind. I looked at Vanessa, whose face was completely flushed with panic. I looked over at Margaret, who was speed-walking toward us, looking like she wanted to tackle me over the balustrade into the sea. I held all the cards. I could scream. I could cry. I could expose them right here, right now, and ruin the entire weekend in front of the aristocratic in-laws they worshipped. But I didn't. I squeezed Isabella's hands, offering her my warmest, most gracious smile. "It truly is a miracle, Signora Moretti," I said, my voice smooth as glass. "But you know my family. They tend to over-exaggerate certain situations to avoid inconvenience. I wouldn't have missed this for anything. In fact, the journey here was incredibly illuminating." Margaret arrived, gasping for breath, trying to grab my arm. "Clara, darling, you shouldn't be out of bed. You're sick." I yanked my arm away smoothly, turning my icy gaze to my mother. "Oh, I'm perfectly healthy, Mom. Never felt better. Actually, I feel like a massive weight has been lifted." The tension in the air was so thick you could choke on it. The Morettis looked slightly confused, but charmed by my sudden recovery. My family looked like they were standing on a trapdoor waiting for the lever to be pulled. I spent the rest of the welcome dinner mingling effortlessly. Because I was the only one in my family who had bothered to learn the language, I spent an hour conversing with Leo's grandparents in broken but enthusiastic Italian. I made them laugh. I praised the food. I was the absolute picture of the supportive, charming sister. Every time I caught Margaret or Vanessa's eye across the terrace, I smiled. A slow, knowing, terrifying smile. They spent the entire evening in a state of high-alert panic, unable to enjoy a single moment of their luxury, terrified of what I might say next. The hostile rebellion had begun, and I was just getting warmed up. I woke up the next morning to the deafening sound of a Napoli garbage truck grinding its gears right outside my hostel window. My back ached from the thin mattress, and the communal shower offered nothing but lukewarm trickles, yet I had never felt more invigorated. While I was sipping a €1 espresso at a corner cafe, my phone finally buzzed with a message I had been anticipating. It wasn't a text. It was an email from Francesca Bianchi, the formidable local wedding coordinator for the spectacular Villa Simbroni, where the ceremony was to be held. Subject: urgent. Final payments and access codes. Cara Clara, the florist and the catering staff are refusing to begin the grand setup. Your father's wire transfer was returned for insufficient funds. I cannot reach your mother. As the primary project manager on the contract, please advise immediately. I stared at my phone, a slow, wicked grin spreading across my face. In their desperate scramble to cut costs and cover up their financial inadequacy, Margaret and Daniel had forgotten one crucial detail. I was the sole signatory and administrative contact for every single vendor. I held the master passwords, the digital itineraries, and the communication channels. I took the treacherous bus ride back up the cliffs to Ravello, breathing in the scent of lemon groves and impending destruction. Margaret ambushed me the second I stepped into the plaza near their luxury suites at the Belmond Hotel Caruso. She looked frantic, the designer sunglasses pushed up into her meticulously styled hair. "Where have you been?" she hissed, grabbing my wrist and pulling me into an alcove out of sight of the main promenade. "Francesca has been calling Daniel all morning about some banking error." "It's not an error, Mom," I said, calmly prying her manicured fingers off my arm. "You're broke. You blew the remaining catering budget on Vanessa's upgraded bridal suite and that vintage Alfa Romeo." Margaret's face tightened. She reached into her Bottega Veneta handbag, a bag she had purchased just to impress Isabella, and pulled out a thick envelope. "Look, here is 3,000 euros in cash. Take it. Go spend a week in Rome, go shopping, do whatever you want. Just leave. You're making Vanessa nervous, and if Isabella finds out you aren't actually sick, she'll think we're lunatics." I looked at the envelope. 3,000 euros. It was insulting. "Keep your money," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You're going to need it to pay Lorenzo, the head caterer, before he packs up the truffles and leaves your aristocratic guests eating stale bread." "Clara, please," Margaret's voice finally cracked, a genuine note of panic bleeding through her arrogant facade. "Don't do this. If the Morettas find out we are stretched this thin, if they find out about the flight." "I won't sabotage the wedding," I interrupted smoothly. "I have too much professional pride to let my own hard work go up in flames. I will authorize Francesca to proceed, and I will fix your mess with Lorenzo. But I am staying. I am attending every single event, and you are going to smile at me while I do it." I walked away, leaving her trembling in the alcove. That evening was the rehearsal dinner. The atmosphere was incredibly tense, masking itself as pre-wedding jitters. I sat next to Leo's grandfather, cheerfully debating the merits of Neapolitan pizza versus Roman style. Across the table, Vanessa looked like she was chewing on glass. Halfway through the evening, Isabella Moretti tapped her spoon against her crystal wine glass. The room quieted down. She stood up, radiating absolute power, draped in vintage Cartier diamonds. "Before we toast to the beautiful couple," Isabella began, her sharp eyes scanning the table until they locked onto mine, "I want to take a moment to celebrate the unsung hero of this weekend, Clara." Margaret gasped softly. Daniel choked on his wine. "I had a very illuminating conversation with Francesca Bianchi this afternoon," Isabella continued, her tone conversational but carrying a lethal undertone. "She informed me that it was Clara who managed the crisis with the caterers today. In fact, Francesca told me Clara has been the sole orchestrator of this entire affair for the past 8 months, free of charge." Isabella slowly turned her gaze to Margaret and Daniel. "Which made me wonder," Isabella said, her voice dropping a terrifying octave, "why the architect of this beautiful event was placed on a budget airline with a grueling layover, and why she is currently sleeping in a youth hostel in Naples, while the rest of you occupy the premium suites." The silence in the room was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop on the terracotta floor. "Oh, Isabella, there's been a massive misunderstanding," Daniel stammered, his face sweating profusely. Clara insisted. She wanted the authentic backpacker experience. "Do not insult my intelligence, Daniel," Isabella snapped, slamming her hand down on the table. The crystal glasses rattled. "I also happen to have eyes at the bank. When the florist payment bounced today, my husband had his financial team look into the wire transfer. You are over-leveraged. You are entirely out of money. You cut your own daughter's flight to pay for a rental car to impress us." The wedding day dawned bright, cloudless, and suffocatingly tense. The revelation at the rehearsal dinner had shattered my family's aristocratic illusion into a million jagged pieces. The Morettis despised nothing more than social climbers, but they despised liars even more. I arrived at Villa Simbrone 2 hours before the ceremony, wearing my emerald slip dress, perfectly at ease. The air was chaotic, but not with the usual joyous bridal energy. I found Vanessa in the bridal suite. She wasn't glowing. She was sobbing hysterically into a silk handkerchief, careful not to ruin her makeup. Margaret was pacing the room, furiously typing on her phone, looking 10 years older than she had the day before. Leo was standing in the doorway, his arms crossed, his usually warm face carved from stone. He looked up as I entered. "Clara," he said softly, "I am so sorry." "What's happening?" I asked, looking between the three of them. "Leo is trying to ruin everything," Vanessa wailed, pointing a trembling finger at him. "His parents are forcing me to sign a post-nuptial agreement. Right now, before I walk down the aisle." Leo stepped forward, his voice devoid of its usual affection. "It's not a post-nup, Vanessa. It's an ironclad separation of assets. My parents refused to let your family's financial negligence touch the Moretti company." He turned his disappointed gaze to Margaret. "You lied to us. You pretended to be something you're not, and worse, you abused Clara to pull it off." "We did what we had to do," Margaret shrieked, finally dropping the polite mask entirely. "We wanted our daughter to have a wedding worthy of your family. Is that a crime?" "The crime," Leo replied coldly, "is that Vanessa knew exactly what you did with Clara's ticket money, and she laughed about it. I don't marry into cruelty." For a terrifying second, I thought he was going to call the whole thing off. The thought was tempting, but the reality of 150 guests waiting in the gardens was heavy. "I'll sign it," Vanessa whispered, her voice defeated. She knew she had no leverage. The golden child had finally flown too close to the sun, and the wax was melting rapidly. The ceremony proceeded. Visually, it was a masterpiece. The floral arch overlooking the endless blue of the Amalfi Coast was breathtaking. The string quartet played perfectly. But the energy was utterly deceased. When it came time for the reception, the power dynamic was painfully obvious. Isabella had taken total control. The seating chart I had painstakingly designed had been completely rearranged by the Morettis. Margaret and Daniel, who had fully expected to be seated at the head table of honor, were banished to table 14, a table tucked away in the far corner of the terrace, right next to the kitchen doors and the portable cooling units. They sat there in their expensive, unpaid-for clothes, isolated and humiliated, completely frozen out by the high society they had so desperately tried to infiltrate. And Vanessa? She got her Italian air, but she lost the war. She spent the entire reception sitting rigidly next to Leo, surrounded by glaring in-laws who now saw her exactly for what she was, a heavily indebted, manipulative liability. Her smile for the cameras was brittle, her eyes constantly darting around to see who was whispering about her. As for me, Isabella personally escorted me to the main table. I was seated right between Leo's charming cousin and a prominent Milanese art director who spent 2 hours offering me a job at his agency. I ate perfectly seared scallops, drank vintage Barolo, and danced under the Italian stars. Around 11 p.m., while the party was still raging, I decided I had had enough. I walked over to table 14. Margaret and Daniel were staring blankly at the remnants of their tiramisu. "I'm heading out," I said cheerfully. Margaret didn't even look up. Daniel let out a long, defeated sigh. "Have a safe trip back, Clara." "Oh, I'm not going back to New York just yet," I smiled. "I kept the 3,000 euros Mom offered me yesterday. I figured since I earned it by doing all the project management for this disaster, I might as well spend it. I'm taking a ferry to Capri tomorrow." I left them sitting in the shadows of their own ruined egos. I walked out of the opulent gates of Villa Simbrone, the cool sea breeze whipping through my hair. I hailed a local taxi, rolling the windows all the way down as we sped along the winding coastal roads back to Naples. I didn't care about the uncomfortable hostel bed waiting for me. I didn't care about the noisy roommates. For 26 years, I had been the background character, the unpaid servant, the afterthought. But tonight, as I watched the moonlight reflect off the Mediterranean Sea, I realized the ultimate truth. Karma doesn't always wait for the next lifetime. Sometimes it catches a budget airline, crashes the party, and serves the bill right to your table. Thank you so much for watching this crazy story unfold. If you enjoyed seeing Clara serve up the ultimate karma to her toxic family, smash that like button and share this video with someone who loves a good revenge tale. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss out on our daily dose of real-life drama. See you next time.